Okay, welcome. Good morning. My name is Yokiko Hayashi-Saguil, and I work with the College Bound Scholarship doing the communications and outreach. And with me today,
this is Christina Winstead, and I work with the 12th Year Campaign, and I also work with the FAFSA Completion Portal.
So today we're going to talk about how to access the College Bound Scholarships, specifically for your seniors and what the next steps they're going to need to be aware of. So we've got a few things on the agenda, just a general scholarship overview, how to file the FAFSA or WASFA, whichever the student may need to do, and then some financial aid basics, so what it is, what their reward might look like, and just some general reminders and tips. So for the scholarship sign-up review, students would have applied by submitting a complete application by June 30th of their 8th grade year. They then sign the repledge, or the pledge itself, which is to pledge that they are going to graduate with a 2.0 GPA, have no felony convictions, and graduate from a Washington State high school and get that diploma. And then they got a certificate. So we want to just remind them that the College Bound Scholarship is something that they applied for and that they did make a commitment in order to obtain the scholarship funds. So as I mentioned before, the pledge itself, you want to have students graduating with that cumulative 2.0 GPA, not have a felony conviction, and then in order to verify their income when they are at the high school level, they do that through the FAFSA or the WASFA. So they're applying for financial aid. It indicates to us that they still meet that income eligibility, and we do not have a preference on whichever form they fill out, but they just need to fill out that FAFSA or WASFA so that way we know that they can receive the College Bound funds. So once the student has completed those pledge requirements, something to keep in mind for our undocumented students or students who have DACA status, they may be able to have some opportunities for the College Bound Scholarship, but they're not going to fill out the FAFSA, they're going to fill out the WASFA. So you could be able to get some of these funds. So we just want to let students know they might not have realized it before, but we did have a legislation change which opens up College Bound for those students. And then because we had the FAFSA and WASFA priority deadlines move up a little bit, we want to remind them that they still can apply for financial aid, but a lot of the schools have a priority deadline, but that doesn't mean that it's too late. So I used to work at the Evergreen State College. We always had a priority deadline, but as the student maybe didn't know about admission processes sooner, sometimes you catch them a little bit later on in the process, so they still can, and we want them to as soon as possible, especially before that fall quarter begins. And then the last thing you want to keep them in mind is that you want these students to be admitted. So they have to apply to colleges, they have to be admitted, and they have to enroll within 1 year of graduating from high school in order to receive the College Bound Scholarship. So what does the College Bound Scholarship pay for? So in combination with other types of state financial aid, it covers the cost of tuition at comparable public college rates, and some fees and a small book allowance. So this is sort of the general concept of what the College Bound Scholarship is going to cover, but what really makes the difference is that College Bound is that guaranteed set of funds, and then that works with state need grant and other types of financial aid to make sure that all the students' costs are met. So it's not going to cover room and board, transportation, and other expenses. That's where the other types of financial aid are going to come into play. So that's something you want to remind students that it's not a full ride scholarship. It's not $40,000, but it does cover these very specific, but it's a rather significant chunk of what the students would have to pay for.
So applying for financial aid, this is the fun stuff, at least I think it's the fun stuff. Some students think it's boring. But we want to make sure that the students are meeting all the deadlines for financial aid and admission. So there's 2 critical deadlines there. I mean, there's actually a 3rd critical deadline too, and that is scholarships. So they're foundation scholarships as well. But we want to make sure they're meeting those deadlines. They need to submit the FAFSA or the WASFA. There can be only one. So you make sure they apply for one or the other, but not both. And then make sure that students aren't waiting until they're admitted to a college to submit the FAFSA or WASFA. They want to make sure they're doing both of those so that they can have an award letter to help them decide whether that's the right fit for them as an institution. Remember that the financial aid package is part of finding the right fit for a student. It's not too late to apply for financial aid. for a lot of institutions. And so you want to make sure that, especially with your CBS students, that they're applying for financial aid. So currently in Washington State, as of Monday, we had a 44.5 FAFSA completion rate in Washington State. And so what that means is that we've got a lot of students out there that that have not applied for financial aid that probably have post-secondary plans that would benefit them to apply for financial aid. So we're really making some big pushes to make sure that students have access to those funds. Now, we do know right now, currently, there is a challenge, and that challenge is the data retrieval tools outage. The data retrieval tool outage, for those of you who don't know, is the data retrieval tool is a tool that you can use within the FAFSA that links IRS information to the FAFSA, so your tax information for a student and the parents, and it imports it directly into a FAFSA. Unfortunately, that tool is currently down and will be down until October, till the next FAFSA cycle. Now, this is a big challenge because it made it easier for parents to input that information, but we have a great list of resources on our website under Ready, Set, Grad for navigating the DRT outage, how to get tax forms, even though, because a lot of people don't have access to their 2015 taxes, so how to retrieve those 2015 taxes and how to manually enter that information into the FAFSA. There's also been additional guidance provided to the colleges in the awarding process, allowing them to accept different documentation for the verification process in order to satisfy those requirements. So I encourage students, if they've received a letter of verification and they're being asked for a tax transcript or a letter of non-filing, things like that, they want to make sure they check in with their college to make sure the process is still the same for the verification process, that they still need those documents. So the DRT is down, but that does not mean our chances for applying for FAFSA is out. The FAFSA is still up and going, and so is the WASFA, and we'd love for more students to apply. So next we're going to talk about some definitions. We're going to talk about more about financial aid. I know that this process, because our numbers are a little low this year, we've heard that it's a little intimidating since we started it in October instead of January. And also, I have heard that some students may have forgot about this because they didn't hear about it in January, so we're just trying to make sure the word's out. So just some quick definitions, because we want to make sure we're on the same page when we're talking about these terms, and everyone can have different definitions of them. But we're going to be talking about financial aid as a type of financial support for students to attend post-secondary pathways, and it can come in the form of loans, scholarships, and grants. So we look at financial aid as an umbrella of funding for that student. College Bound, of course, is that early commitment of state financial aid to students who meet income eligibility, foster youth in Washington State, as well as students who are going to be applying in 7th and 8th grade. So a lot of the students that are coming to you at the high school, they've already applied, that process is done, and really the requirements we're looking at is they complete that FAFSA, they apply to college, or they complete that WASFA. The FAFSA is a free application for student federal aid. The WASFA is the Washington application for state federal aid. It is also free. We just didn't want to put an extra S in that long word there. The STAR is the student aid report, and it gives you a lot of information on the student's application for financial aid. So it'll also tell them, you can see in there if they filed the right year for FAFSA, as well as you can see if they maybe made some mistakes on income or family size. I noticed a lot of students are putting their family size as their family as dependents, like their parents are dependent on them, which they're not, and so they don't understand the term dependence, and so I'm noticing that a little bit. And you can see that on the STAR pretty easily, and then it's easy to go back and correct it. Our expected family contributions are EFC, and then college/institution is a post-high school opportunity ranging from certified programs, like certificated programs, through PhD programs. You can tell it is time for another cup of coffee. So the WASFA, most of you probably know this, and this is a review, but the WASFA is the application for Washington State financial aid. We're really fortunate in Washington State. We're one of, I think, 3 or 4 states that offer this opportunity to undocumented Washington State residents. So if you're unable to file the FAFSA due to immigration status, or if you have DACA status, the WASFA is a great opportunity. Also, if you're not sure which application your student should fill out, have them go to the WASFA page and take our quick 2-minute assessment to see if they qualify for the FAFSA or the WASFA, and then it'll route them to the correct application. Of course, with the changes and some of the rules, our Dreamers and DACA students, they're going to be able to possibly receive that college-bound scholarship, which is great. So we're, in addition to them being able to get the WASFA, they also will be eligible for the college-bound scholarships, and that they have to meet certain criteria. And so we want to make sure that those students understand that that opportunity is there. We want to make sure all students know about their opportunities. So we're going to talk about kind of the WASFA flow next. A lot of students wonder what happens when you click submit and sign. They want to know what happens next. And so when a student completes their WASFA, what's going to end up happening is the Access Group, which is a WASAC partner, they're going to process your application. That information is secure, and then they will send that information to the colleges that are listed on the student's WASFA. And then WASAC will send your WASFA data out. So what happens is we send that data out, and then the student will also receive information on the application they filled out. That application they can sign digitally now, so they don't have to do paper applications. It's a great tool, the new Access Group application. If you want to learn more about it, we have a line-by-line of the new WASFA right on our website at Ready, Set, Grad for 12th year. Big things. When WASAC contacts a student about an error in the WASFA, they need to follow up with WASAC. If they don't follow up, it can delay their financial aid and it can really impact them. So they need to check at least once a week the email that they provided for those applications. Biggest problems is signing the actual document, getting students to go in and sign it. So making sure the student and the parent signs the application. If there's a problem with the student's application, I encourage to take action immediately instead of waiting because deadlines are still passing. Now, the financial aid flow, you'll see here, this will be, this is combined of FAFSA and WASFA. So you can kind of see it's the same processes, but I know people are concerned with the WASFA it being a third-party application, and we just want to stress that that is a secure application. So for financial aid flow in general, students will complete the FAFSA or the WASFA. Department of Ed will process the FAFSA, WASAC processes the WASFA, and then the student will get a SAR report, which is that report that tells them all about their application. They'll send the data to the colleges that they've listed in their FAFSA or WASFA, so tell students no matter how many schools they're looking at, put all of them on there. And then for the WASAC portion, they'll send that WASFA data to the colleges so they can process those awards. A lot of students are receiving awards right now, and there's a webinar as well through SPI and WASAC to help you assess your award letters. So for the students, they need to, and counselors can help with this, their next big steps is to make sure that they review their SAR for accuracy. Make sure that they didn't put any errors in there. It's very easy to do. And if there is an error that's caught, it's okay. You can change it. No problem. Use your FSA ID to log right back into that FAFSA, and you can fix those errors. Same with the WASFA. You can log back in and correct any errors. College Bound then is going to match the FAFSA or WASFA to the College Bound application and send you an email as soon as that match has been made. So that you'll know, oh, okay, now my FAFSA's in. I've got my College Bound application. And then the college is going to prepare a financial aid package for that student, and they're going to send the student an award letter.
And I would like to highlight with the College Bound part, we often get emails and phone calls from students saying, hey, I didn't get a match email for my FAFSA or my WASFA, and we will often go in and have to remind the student that, remember that email that you sent us back when you were in 7th grade? We sent it to that email because we don't have that updated version. So if a student you know is a college-bound student, but they haven't received that match email, tell them to contact us so that way we can verify that we have the correct contact information in their application, because that's something that we often find is that students like, I don't know if I have the College Bound scholarship. I never got notified that it matched with my FAFSA or my WASFA. And it's totally reasonable that they did get the email, just not to the email that we know is their current email address. We sent it to their old one.
They change email addresses pretty frequently, so this is a great time to remind students to update all their information or to link their account so the email is going to one inbox, so they're at least getting that information. And then when they're creating a new email address, because the other piece is students are having stuff sent to their school email addresses and they lose access to those accounts at the end of the year. So we want to make sure that they've created their own email account, updated all the sites, that are sending information to that account, and that email is a professional one and one that will not make admissions officers blush, or us. So the next steps for WASFA filers with DACA status. So this has been a question from people lately. So what ends up happening is you'll provide the college financial aid office with your I-797, and then you'll fulfill the college-bound scholarship list for the students and meet residency requirements. So they want to make sure they're still doing their WASFA application, that they're applying to their colleges, they're accepting an offer from a college, and they're starting the enrollment process. Again, College Bound is going to match that WASFA application to the CBS application and send an email as soon as there's a successful match. And then the college will determine if the student meets the residency requirements and then prepares the financial aid package and sends an award letter reflecting that package. So when a student receives an email from College Bound, we do not want them just to delete that one. They want to make sure they read the email fully, like not just skimming, not just the title, but the whole thing. So they're going to read all the emails they get from College Bound because they know they're excited about the opportunity. If their financial aid award was complete and matched the College Bound application, great job, awesome, they are good to go. If there was errors in the FAFSA following, they're going to get some information about correcting it, typically either from the college, or if it's a missing signature, sometimes they will get follow-up from the counselors. It's like, hey, we could see in the portal you didn't get your signatures. Then you'll receive another email letting the student receive another email letting them know that their FAFSA was matched their College Bound application. So until those errors are fixed, it's not a completed financial aid application. So students can submit the FAFSA, and that's why when we look at our FAFSA completion rates, we look in completion, not submissions. Currently, we have over, I think, 2,500 students who have errors in their FAFSAs and will not have those processed if they don't fix those errors. So we want the students to go in, correct any errors, and then we'll let them know that it's been submitted successfully with that corrected application. Your colleges will be contacting students on those errors. Again, students don't want to wait on this. They want to make sure they're meeting those deadlines. We've had students before that will not respond to an email for months, and then all of a sudden they can't get that award offer because the deadline has passed. These deadlines are very real and critical. We want to make sure students meet them. If a student has not received an award letter and they're getting nervous, it's okay to have them contact the college they're applying to, because they, number one, will be making those contacts with the university financial aid officers, and they are great resources. And number two, we want to make sure that the student's advocating for themselves. Okay, so class remembers. Check the college website to complete any additional financial aid forms. Also have your students look for foundation scholarships. They're amazing. Promptly answer all emails from the Department of Ed, prospective colleges, and from us. So we want them to make sure. And then if the student is selected for verification, which can be like the scariest words a student hears, they want to make sure they start that process early, that they communicate openly with the college about that process to make sure that they're getting the correct forms. And that they request, if they have to request something from IRS, that they do it immediately to make sure they get that documentation back in time and to the college by the deadline.
So now that we have that sort of baseline with the financial aid components, we're going to go into how to understand the award that students are going to have. So when we go in to talking about your financial aid award, and we talk about this package. So this is sort of the very common way of describing what it is that students are going to get for financial aid. And so it's an entirety of different opportunities that are presented to each student, and I think I want to highlight how important it is that students understand that they do not all have the exact same financial aid award. So what you get is based upon your family's income, your family's circumstances. So no one award letter is going to look the same unless, of course, you and your sibling are twins and you go to the exact same place and everything is the exact same, but there could even be a difference in scholarship, so it's never going to be exactly the same. So I like to dispel that rumor that, well, I got this, how come so-and-so got more? And we just want to remind them that it's individual.
Just like graduate, we don't want them self-advising on graduation requirements. Right. We also don't want them self-advising on award letters.
Exactly. So It's not necessarily important for every student to understand the complete ins and outs of their award letter, so they don't need to know all the specificities about their Pell Grant or state need grant or college bound, but they do need to be aware that they are different buckets that all come into their financial aid award letter. We don't expect them to be absolute experts, especially in that first year, but just know that these funds are going to be able to provide them with the opportunity to attend their college. And so each campus determines what funds pay which expense. So that's why it's really important for students to compare their award letter. So, we want them to have a diverse application that they send out. We want them to apply to their safety, reach, and dream schools. We want them to compare public versus private because not every single opportunity is going to be the same. So students have to be able to weigh what package is going to be the most beneficial for them. So it's important to remind them that every college has different tuition rates, and that means that their award letters are going to be different. So they get to, and each college gets to determine how those funds are paid for. And then that bigger question is, are my college expenses covered? Yes, then you've received the best financial aid you're going to get. And then it really is incorporating that fact that it's individual. So I can't stress that enough. Each circumstance is very specific. And then something that's important to keep in mind is that college bound is not listed explicitly the same because every college does it differently. They might not see college bound itemized out on their financial aid award letter. So if students are concerned saying, hey, I'm college bound, but I don't see it on my financial aid award letter, why don't I see it? Tell them to contact the financial aid office at the college because they're the ones who are going to be able to look into their files to see their financial aid award and say, yes, we've incorporated, because oftentimes, because the college bound scholarship is attached and so closely related to state need grant, sometimes it's just combined into state need grant and it's not specifically itemized. So this is what can happen. Also, it could be that college bound is not listed on the award letter because all the students' financial needs have been met. So college bound is not needed. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the same for every year. So like financial aid rolls, you have to do it every year to determine financial eligibility, which means that you might not necessarily need college bound funds your first year, but your second year you do. And so students have 4 years worth of college bound scholarship to have in terms of monetary value. They get 4 years worth of time and then 5 years worth of eligibility time total to be able to use it. So they have either 12 quarters or 8 semesters of college bound financial eligibility, and then they have 5 years to use it. So it's just important to keep that in mind, and don't let students advise students, because that's sort of the blind leading the blind, or sort of like just knowing enough to be dangerous, and we don't want people to get wrong information because someone's very confident in their half knowledge. We want them to ask the source, because once they contact that financial aid office, they will hear it directly from the people who are administering their financial aid, and those are the people who are most important, not the people who say, well, I did this for financial aid and that worked for me. We want them to really hear it directly from the source because that's where they're going to get the best information. So, as I mentioned before, your college bound scholarship is based on the student's financial aid, or financial needs, rather. And so it coordinates with the state need grant and other state-funded programs like state work study. So it's important for students to realize that it is one part of that umbrella term that we've talked about before, and it covers the tuition. I'm going to just kind of keep pounding this in. It's going to cover tuition at comparable public college rates, fees, and a small book allowance. And so, as I mentioned before, the book allowance, like even the college bound scholarship itself, may be included on the financial aid award, but it might not be noted separately. So you might just see it kind of rolled into the state need grant part. So they just need to ask. And I like to think of it as the college bound scholarship, because it is those guaranteed funds, it bridges the gap. So there are lots of students out there who qualify for the state need grant, which is the largest financial aid program that Washington State has. But those funds are not necessarily guaranteed. There are students who are eligible, there are students who want to apply, but the funds run out. The difference from the state need grant to college bound is that if a student has applied for the scholarship and they've fulfilled the pledge and they've done everything that they need to do, those college bound funds are guaranteed and they are there for that student to use. So they might not necessarily get state need grant because they applied for the financial aid application later, but those college-bound funds will be there. So those state need grant funds are limited, but college-bound is guaranteed for those students because they made a promise, and we want to ensure that they have the opportunity to go. So that's just something to keep in mind, that the college-bound scholarship is really meant to bridge that gap and provide them with that backing that they may need. And then when it comes to private institutions, or private colleges, they will see the tuition rates is going to be at the comparable public college rate. So it's not going to be a full ride or anything like that, but every college is slightly different. So we try to make it as unilateral as possible to provide all those students with the same sort of opportunities to attend those colleges. So the schools will credit your financial aid money to the school. So that money will go directly to the school in order to pay for their tuition, on-campus housing, and et cetera. So that's how the financial aid works. And then students will get the refund. So this is where students are going to get a large chunk of money sometimes for the very first time. So just to remind them not to spend all of it on cars or shoes. You want to encourage them to make smart financial decisions. So, but encouraging them to know that your financial aid is going to pay for all of these things up front, and then anything that's left over from their financial aid package is going to come directly to them, and those funds are designated for them to be able to do the basic living things like buying their groceries, or if they have a meal plan, using it to help them buy school supplies, helping them maintain themselves for the entire quarter, because it's going to be dispersed either on a quarterly or semesterly basis. So having them figure out how to budget is a really smart idea. So that's the one thing when we talk about make a money plan. Financial literacy is something that I harp on all the time. It's really important for a student's personal, professional, and emotional health to be able to start having conversations about how to save and spend their money effectively. They're not going to get it right every time, but if we start to have those conversations with them saying, don't spend all of your financial aid award in the first week that you get the money, because you need to be able to pay for heat, and you need to be able to pay for food, and you need to be able to pay for maybe unexpected medical costs. You just want to remind them, be smart with your money, don't waste it. We don't all live like very wealthy people.
Also, Yokiko, have you seen that they give the students sometimes that money on a debit card, like a little prepaid debit card? So that makes it even harder. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking to your students about financial planning, also including some information on that, because it's really easy to swipe that card. Or like I had one year a student, they went out and bought all college gear because they had never gotten a college hoodie, but they bought the sweatpants and every other item they possibly get their hands on and spent most of their money. Like, they were definitely representing the school, but they spent all their money on those school clothes. So I think it's a lot harder with those cards.
Yeah, and I worked as an advisor at a small public college in Oregon, and I was working specifically with low-income first-gen students, and we lived right by the outlet mall, which was really close, and so a lot of students would get their financial aid and they'd go get North Face jackets and Coach purses, and I'd have to explain like, well, not that I'm trying to disparage you from spending money freely, but I do want you to think about the fact that that one purchase can significantly impact, like it could really push you over the edge at the end of the quarter, and I don't want you to have to struggle thinking about where you're going to get your next meal when you thought about looking cooler than the person sitting next to you. So I'm just telling the cautionary tale.
I know. So for students accepting their award letters, a lot of them have started signing those award letters already, but how you do that is the student will receive, and there's a hard copy and there's also electronic copies now of those award letters. They're going to receive an award letter. They're going to complete and sign that and return it to their financial aid office by the deadline they provide. So it's usually in two different ways. Either you get a letter, like the hard copy letter to the house that has the awards on it, and then you sign it and return it. Or you build your account, your school account, and then they will load in all the award information, and then you can decide to accept or decline the award then. Big thing about awards, of course, we want to talk about is that you don't have to accept all the aid. So students, this is for my students, I've always told them, when it comes to student loans, take what you need, not what you want. So cautionary tales from students at community colleges. When I worked at South Puget Sound, I had a student that bought an Xbox with their student loan, and because they took the full award out, but they didn't really need it. And I made them calculate the cost with interest over the next 10 years that they'd be paying on that. Not talking about an Xbox 360 or an Xbox One. We're talking like straight up old school Xbox that you can find at Goodwill now. And I told them, I was like, where are you going to find that in 10 years? Are you going to be able to find that in the store? You're going to find that at Goodwill. And so just making sure that they understand they don't have to take all that money. It could be a big responsibility because they have to pay it all back if it's a loan. We want to make sure also when we're talking about grants. Grants have always, it seems like, been marketed as free money for students, but there are some rules that come with that, and that is that they need to complete a certain percentage of the classes they attempt, as well as they need to maintain a certain GPA, and those are both listed in the award letter, and if they don't, there could be a repayment situation. So while grant money is wonderful, and it is free if they meet all the qualifications and they follow through, if not, it can lead to a repayment situation. So we want to make sure students understand their rights and responsibilities with those funds.
And that definitely applies to the college-bound scholarship as well. So I think we want to encourage them to say those funds are guaranteed, but we, in terms of expectation, the expectation is that the student is going to do well and be successful, and that they understand the consequence if there's something that happens and their grade suffers, that there is potential that they would have to pay those funds back.
So we encourage all of our students to get to know all the resources on campus early on, the writing center, the math center. As soon as they struggle in a class, they need to be able to advocate for themselves pretty quickly because those college classes go by so quickly. The content, is provided very quickly that they can get into trouble pretty quickly. So we want to make sure they know the resources and they reach out if they are struggling. There's no shame in reaching out. But if they don't reach out until the last day of the quarter, unless you got a way back machine or a time turner, you're not going to be able to help them. If a student's family situation has changed. So let's say someone, we're using 2015 taxes right now. That's a long time. And so sometimes family situations can change, but if a parent has lost their job or there's an illness in the family and their financial situation has changed, they're going to want to make sure they contact their financial aid office to see if there's an opportunity to change that award letter to adjust it to the new income. So you want to make sure that you reach out to them. These are professionals who can assess based upon your situation, and they might even know about other funds. So I had a student that came in, and they didn't know that there was an emergency fund, and they were able to get their car had been broken into. The person who broke into the car knew exactly what the most expensive thing in that car was, textbooks. So they stole the backpack and the textbooks, and the student was able to get an emergency emergency grant from the college to get a new backpack and new textbooks for the quarter. And so you want them to reach out to their financial aid office if there's ever an emergency. Of course, we'd love to have that little nest egg with that extra financial aid money just in case there's an emergency, but always have them reach out.
So for the college-bound scholarship, as we mentioned before, there are some eligibility requirements that students have to fulfill when they are in the process, when they sign up, when they are in high school, they have to meet those pledge requirements. But there are also some requirements that they have to meet while they are in college. So students are going to have to maintain the required GPA, so they need to be in good academic standing. And so every college is different, and that can be determined individually based on the institution. So sometimes that means they need to have a 2.5, it could be a 3.0, it just depends on the institution, but they need to be in good academic standing. And then in order to certify their eligibility financially, they have to fill out a financial aid application. So whether that's the FAFSA or the WASFA, they want to make sure to do that. And when it opens in October, encouraging them to do it as soon as possible because, again, it's the state need grant and other things are first come, first served basis, so the earlier, the better. And I want to remind people that the college-bound scholarship, because they have to file the financial aid application every year, eligibility can come in and out. So a student may not be eligible for college-bound for 1 year, but their income levels can change. Like we talked about, there are circumstances that are beyond a student's control which can impact that family's income, which means that eligibility can sway from 1 year to the next. So because they're a college-bound scholar, they've applied, they've done everything that they need to do, they might not be income eligible that first year, but they totally could become income eligible that next year. And so that eligibility is something that stays there, and then whether or not they need it, that's when the college-bound scholarship will come into play for that student. And then for those students, you want to keep in mind, if the student is now a citizen, they can apply with the FAFSA, not the WASFA, because they're a U.S. citizen, but we want to encourage the students to remember, do not file the FAFSA if they have DACA status. They want to file the WASFA. And then if they don't meet either of those requirements in terms of if they're a citizen or if they have, or they are a permanent resident, that they fill out that WASFA, because the students who are undocumented do have access, if they've done all the residency requirements, to obtain the college-bound scholarship, but they are eligible for the state U grant funds. So we just want to make sure that students understand that they do need to continue to be in good academic standing while they're in college. And so we also want to remind them that students will change their enrollment. So sometimes they'll drop a class, they'll move a class. So they just need to be in contact with their registration office and their financial aid office to notify the student, because this means that a student could go from full-time to three-quarter time. So they just need to be communicating with their financial aid offices, just like you would encourage a student in general when they are enrolled. Keep the offices that are important updated, because that can impact your financial aid.
Definitely. And there is an actual process for adding and dropping classes.
Yes.
I had a student that sat in a class for 2 weeks not realizing that they actually had to physically go in to the enrollment office and change it. And so you want to make sure that if they're dropping a class, they could drop it by a certain deadline and get some percentage back, but they want to look at their deadlines, and they want to look in their enrollment, and they always want to make sure they officially change their classes if they are dropping or adding.
So here's some other reminders that we want to encourage everyone to be mindful of. So a student is required to enroll, or they must enroll within 1 year of completing their high school graduation. So if a student graduated last year in 2016, they must enroll and earn at least 1 credit by the fall of 2017. So that just kickstarts their eligibility. So I just want to encourage them to remember, you have some time. So sometimes there are things that are beyond our control that prevent a student from enrolling that fall quarter, but that doesn't mean that if there is a rolling admission basis at the college that they would like to attend, or they've deferred their application for a semester later or a quarter later, they can absolutely do that. They just need to be enrolled in an eligible institution within 1 year of completing their high school graduation. And you do not have to graduate with your class. So you might have a fifth-year senior. That's totally okay. This is something that's particularly important for our foster youth. So we want to encourage them to know that they don't necessarily have to graduate on that specifically regimented timeline, that they can, once they complete their diploma, they're still eligible. They just need to enroll within that 1 year, and it doesn't have to be with their class. So if something happens, they graduate earlier or they graduate later, that's totally okay. And they need to make sure that they have a high school diploma, not a GED. So this is kind of the one sticky wicket. We want them to know that they have to have that diploma, and that's what makes them eligible. And I mentioned this before, the College Bound Scholarship is a 4-year monetary in terms of time. They have 4 years of scholarship that's available to them. So that's either 12 quarters or 8 semesters. And they have 5 years within their high school graduation to do that. So the example he has is the class of 2016. The scholarship's going to expire by 2021. And we want to encourage students to realize that if a student plans to earn their bachelor's degree, we encourage them to consider doing it full-time, because that gives them the opportunity to use the funds in the amount of time that we've allotted. We realize that that's not always applicable to every single student, but if they can attend full-time and go in and complete their bachelor's degree, this is going to be a really great addition or resource for them. And then a bachelor's degree is the highest that a student can earn with the College Bound Scholarship. So, that's when the funds are going to run out. But this is for our Running Start students. Just to remind them that if they do Running Start in the high school, this automatically will start that enrollment verification, so that within 1 year of completing their high school graduation, enrolling into an institution, if they're Running Start, they're automatically in that eligibility pool because they're already attending a 2-year college. But what's important to know is that they still have 4 years worth of scholarship to use. So they have a lot more mobility, and that the student could consider, if they have done their associate's degree within a short period of completing their high school diploma, that this gives them the opportunity to consider a double major if that's something they're interested in, or taking a little bit more time to study something that they find interesting or applicable to their degree plan. So if you're college bound, we want you to realize that this is a resource for you, and we want to be able to provide you with some of the monetary backing that allows you to do that. So we've seen that students who have signed up for the College Bound Scholarship are graduating from high school at a higher rate than their low-income peers who are not in the College Bound Scholarship complete application pool. So we just want to encourage them that it's important for them to have this, and that, you know, I realize that I have senioritis. I'm in my last quarter of graduate school, and it's really hard to combat the feeling of freedom. But we want to encourage your high school students to persist and to do well and to try and make sure that they maintain their engagement through the last remaining weeks, because that's important. And you know, we have this part that says that they should not have any felony convictions, because that will eliminate their eligibility. So just encourage them to make smart and positive choices. And then students should be in contact with their counselors, or encourage them to connect with you if you're a counselor, to be able to remind them about really important things that they might not be thinking about, because maybe they've never gone to college before, they may be a first-generation student. So just encouraging them to stay connected with their College Bound Scholarship, with their colleges that they're interested in attending, and just encouraging positive life choices.
So, of course, we're going to do the cautionary tale, a few words about loans. So, my goal for this generation, and I've been saying this for a couple years now, I'm hoping it happens, but my goal, my wish for this next generation of students is that they are the first generation in a long time to graduate college or post-secondary opportunities without crippling financial debt. I would like that to stay with my generation. I don't really want it to be our legacy, but I would love for this generation to be able to start livable wage jobs. Like, my whole goal is for students to find something they love to do that earns a livable wage, and be able to complete the training for that career in the most financially feasible way. So part of that is being very smart about loans. On average, when a student graduates from Washington State University or college, a public four-year, typically they have about $25,000 in student loans. So those students will say, I don't want any student loans. We totally understand, but those students may have to take a student loan for that college. So we want to make sure that they're making a smart choice. Loans can be very scary, but I think with some education on them, that can really break down some of the anxiety that comes with it. We want to make sure that students understand what their earning potential with their training will be. And there is some great information you can go to. If you go to WorkSource's website, they have a decline demand list that will tell you the projection between now and I think 2024 for those careers, what the income of those careers will be, and it has information about those jobs. We want students to know that the field they're going into, that they'll be able to pay their student loans with it. And so that also can help them determine how big of a student loan they could take. I don't want students to be so crippled that they're not able to they're not able to pay their rent or food or things like that because they have a student loan. But there's also different ways to pay student loans and things like that. For federal direct Stafford and Perkins loans, those are only for our FAFSA filers, not our WASFA filers. And they're typically the lowest interest rates. So students want to look at interest rates. They want to look at subsidized versus unsubsidized. And then at the last resort, they can look at private loans, which do not come with some of the benefits of the government subsidized and unsubsidized loans, including repayment options and flexibilities. Students also want to know how long they're going to be paying this for. I think it's more real if they write it down. Okay, I'm going to take this amount. Now I'm going to have to pay $300 a month. What is that going to look like? So we want them to really understand. Only take what you need, not what you want. If a student takes a student loan, so you might have students who come back to you after they graduate from college. Those are the best when they tell you, like, oh, I did it, yay. But they may also have questions about, like, oh, I got this thing about refinancing my loan. They really want to look at that, because sometimes when you refinance a loan from a federal loan to a private company, you lose your ability to not only change your repayment options, but the interest rate change will be typically the highest of your interest rates, and it will go across all of your student loans. Just some things to think about in student loans. It's scary, but we want to make sure that students have those opportunities. We want them to be very educated on how this is going to impact them and what they can take.
So one thing that we want to kind of highlight that is very much a part of the enrollment process is transition. So students are graduating from high school, they are leaving their required education experience and moving on into the elected education experience, which means that there is an absolute shift in terms of what their expectations are and what their new environment is going to be like. And so something that is very prevalent is this term called summer melt. So this is where students who have every indication that they are going to go and enroll in a post-secondary option somehow fall out of the bandwagon, and they do not enroll and they do not persist onto their post-secondary option. And so this transition piece is really fundamental for success, especially for our high-risk population. So your first-generation students, your students who may not speak English as their first language, students who are students of color. I mean, with huge barriers in place, that imposter syndrome of I don't belong here, I don't know if this is the right thing for me, will there be other students like me? We want to discourage them feeling like an imposter and really encourage them to feel a sense of confidence and going into their first year of school. Because to be honest, everybody is new when they go to college that first time, and there's no one who walks onto a college campus that's an absolute expert on everything in that college. It's just very, very rare. So for the transitions, there's a few different opportunities for students to be able to bridge that gap. Some of them are summer bridge programs, so this is where they can go onto college campuses a week or so before, which engage them on campus, meet other students who are like them. There are first year experience courses that are available, so often these are elected courses, but they provide students with college I would say academic and personal and professional skills development to allow them to understand how to study, how to be prepared, and they can translate these things into other parts of their lives. So we also want to encourage them to participate in services that are available on their college campuses. So accessing academic support services, so that could be tutoring, that could be writing, it could be anything like that. If a student needs accommodations, to register with their disability services or disability resource office. And then if a student is TRIO eligible, so a TRIO program, federally funded program for students who are first generation, low income, or have a documented disability, every campus that offers a TRIO program has a different set of requirements in terms of the number of students that they can provide services to. So sometimes it could be that you have one of those pieces because they have enough room to provide services to a lot of different students, or sometimes they might have to have more. It just depends. You need to be able to ask questions about that. Inquiring about mental health and counseling services is also really important. There are lots of college campuses that provide free counseling services to students, and that can do that on a multiple visit basis. I used to work at a college that provided free visits 6 times a year for students every single year, and that can be fundamental to their success on a campus. And then also learning about other resources like a food pantry, a clothing bank, and other opportunities on their campuses. I would really encourage you to have your students consider doing a summer bridge program. I did this in college, and it hands down made my experience as a college student so much more enriching because I felt a sense of community before I started taking classes. And even though the students that I did the summer bridge program were not enrolled in the same courses that I was, it provided me with this sense of belonging on a campus where I was one of many, and it just really allowed me to feel connected because I did not live on campus when I was a student. I commuted. And so that barrier of not living on campus can really allow those students to feel disassociated with what they're doing. And so having Summer Bridge allowed me to feel connected even though I wasn't living in the on-campus housing. So it's those little things that can really make a huge difference.
So we have some resources. Of course, this is where I'm going to talk about 12th year for a second. So we are just opened up our 12th year campaign for next school year for sites and schools to sign up. So the 12th year campaign is a combination of the American College Application Campaign and what used to be called College Goal Sunday, but we now call College Goal Washington. And what we do is we provide training and materials and connections to resources for events at high schools and community groups to be able to help students complete the FAFSA, WASFA, as well as college applications. And so the 12th year campaign, last year I'm really excited, I started playing with data, but this year our sites, so we had 130 sites, mostly high schools that signed up, and our high schools that participated in the program this year had almost an 8% FAFSA completion rate higher than schools that did not participate. So we're really excited about that data. There's a lot of free resources, including workbooks, stickers, postcards, as well as trainings, like we do a line by line on the FAFSA and WASFA, which sounds totally boring, but it's really exciting because you learn all about it. So I encourage you, if you're interested, let us know. You can sign up. My email address is right on here, and you can sign up right online at the bit.do/12th year. We also have Department of Ed information here, so if you have questions about the FAFSA, the Department of Ed's been communicating changes, as well as I've been pushing those communications out to our sites.
And if you have questions and you want to contact either of us, I mean, you can contact the College Bound Scholarship. We do have our call line available, so anytime there are questions about if a student signed up or where their application is or what the status is or do we have their FAFSA or WASFA on file, have them call us. I mean, we want them to hear from us and we want to hear from them, so that way we have the most updated information about them. We do have a listserv that we send out to our college-bound students while they're in high school, so we have it set up for 9th grade all the way through their senior year. And then we also have a listserv that we send out to counselors, so we can keep you updated about things that are changing, upcoming events, things that are important, and things that are happening. So you can absolutely contact us at the College Bound email, and we'd be happy to get you signed up.
And 12th year, you can go right to our website to get to look at free resources. We're updating those resources for next year right now. If you have any questions, or maybe if you're thinking about how can I increase FAFSA WASFA applications at my school or provide more opportunities or increase college-going culture at my school, give me a call or email me. I'm happy to set up a time where we can talk about how to meet those goals you have for your schools.
And now if you have questions for either of us, you can contact us. Our emails are written up there. You can feel free to reach out to us anytime. I mean, we're putting on these webinars once a month.
Once a month-ish.
Once a month-ish, and we do stuff and outreach constantly. So if there's any ways that we can connect with you and provide you with more information, we'd be happy to do so.
Well, thank you so much for joining our webinar. We hope that you take this information and help all your college-bound students. If you have questions, let us know, and we will see you at the next webinar. Thank you.